are many reasons to love Mark Cuban. He's an investor, a businessman, and a true entrepreneur. He's on ABC's hit show Shark Tank, and he owns the Mavs. So he, in many ways, also invented online video with broadcast.com. He also continues to invest where mobile and technology are going next: sensors, the connected home, and messaging. Who better to have a conversation with Mark about innovation and mobility than our own Glenn Lurie? Please welcome to the stage of Super Mobility, Mark and Glenn. Stud number one, stud number two.
All right. How's everybody doing? That was better than yesterday. All right, well done. Hey, Mark, you're popular. Look at all the camera phones.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, who's hungover? Because I'm gonna sound a whole lot smarter to you guys.
So how are you?
I'm great.
Good. I'm going to start.
Not hungover, just for the record.
Yeah, you look great. Well, Mark was told he was a beautiful man in the back, and so I thought that was a pretty good start to your day.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming from you, Glenn, absolutely.
All right, let's start. I'm going to start with basketball.
Okay.
Let's talk about how you're feeling about your Mavericks this year.
I like it. I mean, you know, there was some guy from Oklahoma City who went to Golden State, and I didn't get the move at all. It made no sense to me, but it opened the door for us to get Andrew Bogut and Harrison Barnes, Seth Curry, not Steph Curry, his brother. And I think we really picked up some good pieces, and obviously Dirk coming back, D. Will coming back. I think we're going to surprise some people. I think we've got a lot more depth and a lot more skill than people really recognize. But, you know, that's why we play the games. That's great.
That's great. So what are your thoughts? I mean, for the NBA as a whole, I was just reading something the other day. I was talking about super teams are good for the league.
I'm fine with super teams simply because they tend to be the villain.
Right.
You know, when LeBron went to Miami and this really amazing team from Dallas beat them in the championship. You know, everybody hated them. Everybody, literally, after we beat the Cavs, I walked into a restaurant in New York and just randomly, and people stood up and gave me a standing ovation. It was crazy, but you know, I think having villainous teams like that helps the NBA.
Yeah. Let me ask you one more question. You re-signed Dirk.
Uh-huh.
And showed a lot of, a lot of owners aren't like you, right? You showed a lot of.
And they're thankful for that.
Yeah. Well, you showed a lot of loyalty to a guy who's been with you for a long time. Talk about that.
You know, Dirk has played for the Mavs for 17 years. Yeah. He was there the year before I got there, and I've kind of grown up in the business with him. And so he's just an amazing, amazing man in so many different respects. And, you know, hopefully I've set the same example with other employees and other of my businesses. You know, if you lay it on the line for me, I'm going to do the same for you. And so now I'm not going to say I'm paying all my employees $25 million a year, but it's all market driven. But yeah,
they all can't
he wasn't
shoot
going
like
anywhere.
him either, right?
What's that?
They all can't shoot a jumper like you.
No, man, but I try to help him.
So let's move a little bit with basketball and technology.
Uh-huh.
Talk about how you brought technology into the Mavericks and how you use technology with the team.
Oh my goodness! I mean, I try to drive. There's basketball, there's the skill, and then there's information, right? And then there's communicating with fans, and then the integration of all of that. And so I've tried since the day I walked in the door, January 2000. I've tried to integrate technology from, you know, there's a company called Synergy Sports, which really got started streaming video of every game in basketball across every level so that we can review plays. Use now to the point now where I've got a company I advise called Catapult that does heart sensors and tracks heart rate during practices and in test games now, preseason games that transmit live data so we can track. So the whole thing is going from data-driven decision-making to bioanalytics, because you know, when you pay somebody $25 million, you want him to be as healthy as possible. So we're really using sensors, we're using algorithms, we're using integration, we're using Internet of Things, we're using bandwidth, we're using hardwired, we're using, you know, wireless, to just aggregate as much data as we possibly can and then use that. And now I'm starting to make a big push into machine vision. So rather than us having to tag and key, we just take the video and translate it into data, and that leads to deep learning and machine learning and, you know, at some point AI. So, you know, data, you know, is eating the world, to paraphrase somebody.
You think Mark has his pulse on technology? Mark, let's talk real quick before we get in. I want to talk about Shark Tank. You know, talk about how you got involved. And one question I think people have is, talk about how real it is. How does it really work?
Okay, well, let's go there. So first of all, it's all fake. Kevin O'Leary is a robot because nobody could be that disgusting in real life. No, seriously, that is. Anyways, back to Shark Tank. It's real, right? And we have nothing to do with who comes on the show. So when they walk on that carpet in front of us, it's the first time we see them. All we know about them is their first name. That's it. And so they get out there and they start pitching, which you see on television. But then from there, the deal process, the interaction, and the Q&A can go as long as 2.5 hours for a really intense deal. And then they edit it down. Now for stupid deals, then it might take 20 minutes, right? Yeah. And we're like, get out of here. But it's an amazing show to be part of. It's really our money. I've invested, I think I'm up to like $16 or $17 million across 71 companies.
Wow. Really?
And the show premieres again, write this down, September 23rd, Friday nights on ABC. Yeah. Wait, did I say that right? September 23rd, Friday nights. Always be selling. But you know, I've done 71 deals, but it really is our money. And so out of the 71, I'd say probably 5 have been, oh my God, what am I thinking? Or what was I thinking? You know, 2 of those have gone out of business. 2 are out of business and aren't smart enough to know it. And then on the flip side, you can't hit them all, right? Yeah. And then on the flip side, probably the top 12, they're making profits-wise, you know, $500,000 a year or more. And you know, a couple of them I think I've sold 3, 4 now. Companies have made some decent money there. So I'm doing really well with them.
That's great.
But the overall, really, the reason I do the show is it sends the message that the American dream is alive and well. Yeah. It sends the message that, particularly to kids, it's the #1 show in all of television watched by families together. And particularly this year, I think it's so critically important to send the message to our kids that if you set your mind to it, you can be an entrepreneur. If you put in the work, you can be an entrepreneur. And it doesn't matter if you're working out of your garage in a small town in Iowa or you're in New York City or LA, that something amazing can happen, and entrepreneurship is a good thing. It's a positive thing, and you know, I'm a huge believer. Yeah. And I don't think we get enough of that. I mean, I'm a huge believer in American exceptionalism. This, you know, the fact that the American dream is around personal drive is what makes us different than any other country in the world, in my opinion. And so, you know, we get to convey that every week on Shark Tank, and that's why I'm proud to be part of it.
That's great. Thanks. I appreciate that. Let me talk about Twitter for a second. I follow you, by the way.
Oh, good.
You've been on a roll.
Yeah, I've been kind of loud lately.
But talk a little bit. 2 things. First of all,
it's M. Cuban, M-C-U-B-A-N.
Talk a little bit about who you follow. And then also let's talk a little bit about the dialogue you've had in the last couple of weeks around the election.
So I follow all the different industries I'm in, plus obviously all the companies and people I'm involved with work-wise. But where I use Twitter for 2 specific reasons. One, just as a news feed. So, you know, I'll check it in the morning to see if there's anything specific from the different news sources I follow. And then also to super geek out, right? One of the cool things about Twitter is you get some really esoteric geeks out there, you know, that will aggregate leading stories on neural networks or deep learning, all the things that are new to me that I'm really trying to learn. And so that, you know, that's kind of my tickler file for keeping up. So that's how I use Twitter. On a consumption basis. Now, on a posting basis, the last few weeks have been interesting. You know, my entire adult life, I have avoided politics. And I gave to one election in 1999, and I even wrote a blog post about this on blogmaverick.com, about how slimy the whole process was. So I've never given to a candidate. So and I stick to that, and I haven't given to a candidate this year because I want to keep my independence. Right. So all that said, when Donald Trump announced he was running, I thought it was a good thing, right? Live and learn. And I would talk to him on the phone, literally. And I said, you know, he's the best thing that happened to politics. He's not a traditional politician. He says what's on his mind, and that's all still true. Right. You know, it's just what's on his mind that he says that. So he saw that quote, and he put it on his book. He didn't ask me, he just put it on his book, having no idea that things would turn. And I would talk to him, and literally I was trying to help him because this was before he got the nomination, and I was concerned about some other, Ted Cruz in particular. And so I said, okay, I'll help you, Donald. I don't agree with 90% of what you said or your policies, but I think, you know, I'll help you. And I'm an independent, but I kind of lean Republican on financial matters and social. I go the other way. But so once he got the nomination, I said to him, you know, now you've got to learn the issues. You know, you've got to dig into policy and figure things out because it's a big job.
Yeah, it's a huge job.
And I say that with all love and respect. I would kiss him on the cheek if he was here and pat him on the back. I like the guy, but he's just not the right guy. You know, there's certain jobs I would hire him for. President is not one of them. And and look, I notice not everybody is clapping, right? And that's what makes this country great. We all get to convey our opinion and you know, try to do what we think is best for the country. And look, and so I've said that on Twitter, and really what it comes down to is, you know, some people call it temperament. I think it's preparation. I look at this just like as an entrepreneur. When you guys, in our industry, everything's changing every day. Right. And if you don't keep up, you are immediately behind. Right? There's always some new configuration, there's some new integration, there's some new application, there's some new you know, use or advancement. And if you don't keep up, you're behind. And with Donald Trump, he makes no effort to keep up. No. And the only certainty in the presidential position is uncertainty. Right. And so, and I told him that, and that was the last time I spoke to him. So, you know, and I did come out and endorse Hillary Clinton. I'm not a Democrat, but I just thought, you know, it was the right thing for our country.
And if you don't follow Mark, absolutely. If you don't follow Mark, it is one of those things I do look forward to reading, especially the last about 3 weeks. There are a couple of quotes I won't say.
Yeah, and you know what? To be candid, to be honest, you know, I love to mess with people. I'll give people shit all the time, right? So I've kind of taken my trolling skills, started off downhill here, and then after dealing with Donald, they just automatically increase. Because it just takes up. Like Donald and I would get into these Twitter wars, not since he started running, but over the past however many years he's been on Twitter. Yeah. And I would just crush him. And he didn't know he was being crushed. So it was like, it's like he is now, right? He'll say something and then somebody say, but you said this, and no, I didn't. No, we're going to show this to you on tape. No, I didn't. That's the way he is on Twitter. So it was always fun for me.
All right.
Moving on.
Moving on. So let's talk about entrepreneurship and investments. You got the United States wireless industry sitting in front of you. Talk about wireless and mobility. And you listed a few things earlier in the question about what you're doing with the Mavs. And what interests you around our industry and investment?
Well, wireless, I mean, there's huge questions on wireless right now, right? And so with 5G coming up, you know, the big question in my mind is when 5G gets here, whenever that is, 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, 6 years, whatever it turns out to be, are people going to cut the cord? Yeah. Because just like they cut the TV cord and went to internet, and just how we don't wire our homes anymore, they're primarily wireless, you know, are people already so used to using wireless that when they're getting 100 megabits of consistent throughput, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, obviously depending on circumstances, are they just going to say, what do I need this wire for? Yeah, you know, and so, but in complement to that, we have so many big Internet of Thing applications. You know, from self-driving cars to sensors to tracking things, you know, there's going to be sensors everywhere. I have a company, Motion Loft, that all they do is count things. Everything that's in front of it, it counts using machine vision. Put it on a billboard, it counts. Put it, you know, on the side of a building, it counts people, bikes, things. You know, and then all that data has to be transmitted. And then on the back end of that, now that, you know, deep learning and neural networks are becoming more and more important, or becoming more feasible in their use, okay, well, that's going to just create a flood of more data that we're trying to track. And so are we going to bifurcate so that there's, you know, a 5G version that's consumer and, you know, different for commercial? Or so those are the big questions, and I'll look for little spots in there to try to figure out, you know, where I can take advantage of them.
So Mark, you said you got 71 companies, just
Shark Tank.
How many total companies have you invested in? Right now, how many are you worried about?
I don't know, probably 125, give or take.
Really? How do you...
This is no lie. I have them all on markcuban.com if you want to look. And I have to go there and look because I forget the names of some sometimes.
So
it's terrible to say.
So how do you manage that? What kind of a team do you have?
Oh, I have a huge team of really smart people that make me look even smarter. And my management style kind of is I micromanage until I trust you. Yeah. And so I'm there, and then once I'm like, okay, little birdie, I'm setting you free. And then the way I work, I don't do calls, I don't do meetings unless somebody's writing me a check or there's a problem we're trying to solve, right? I'll wear a tuxedo if you're writing me a check. I'll go to whatever meeting. But other than that, you know, I with so many companies and so many things to accomplish, every week or two from each one of those companies, the CEO or somebody designated will send me an email update, and it's always bad news first. Because I expect good news, right? That's why I invested in you. But if there's bad news and you hide it from me, we're going to have issues, right? If you put it out there, then that's what gets my attention. So out of the 150, whatever it is, companies, in any given week, there's 2 or 3 things that gain my attention, and that's what I focus on, and that's kind of how I keep up with everything.
So Mark, when you're sitting, forget Shark Tank, you're in your daily regular role, and somebody wants to come pitch you. What are you looking for? I mean, is it about the person? Is it about the idea?
Everybody always asks that. You know, it really just depends. Really? Because, you know, some of the smartest investments I've made are some of the rattiest looking people ever. And then, like, I over-negotiated this guy named Travis Kalanick.
That guy?
That guy, yeah. I had invested in his company, Red Swoosh, and we had sold it, and we did pretty good. Yeah. And he was like a hustler, and he brought this idea called Uber Cab to me. And I'm like, yeah, Travis, I like it, but you're going to face all these roadblocks from all these different municipalities, the cab organizations. So I think your valuation's too high. I never heard back from them.
He's done okay.
I still give him shit to this day about that. But you know, so and the point being, I'm far from Topgolf is another one, right? Yeah. Like I'm like, this is a great idea, but I don't like golf, right? But you know, and I've had a lot that work, not quite to the size of Uber, but you know, I look for somebody who is relentless in learning, right? Because as I said earlier, if you're not always learning, somebody's going to kick your butt. Right. If you don't know your industry, if you don't know your business, if you don't know your customers, somebody else will do it for you, right? And I look for people who are able to put themselves in the shoes of their customers. To me, that's the untaught skill. Like if you're an AT&T sales rep and you're selling commercial services, you've got to be able to walk into the Dallas Mavericks and not think, okay, does this help Dirk's jump shot, right? But what type of applications can we put this to use for? Or you. Right? And so those are the kinds of skills. And then, you know, it's rare that I'll just deal with one individual. I kind of look for an eeny-meeny setup because nobody can know everything. Right. And so, you know, I'm a ready, fire, aim guy. And so I look for somebody who's really anal to partner with me.
That's good. So talk about the worst pitch ever. The worst one. Not the worst one you invested in, because I imagine that one we don't want to talk about, but the worst one.
Somebody came in with a presentation in a drawing early on after I bought the Mavericks, and kind of one of those favor deals. Yeah. And I'm just getting started, and it was a super afro. Because if you can't block shots with the super afro, you think I'm kidding. Imagine this pitch.
You know, you didn't buy that one?
Yeah, and he's doing about $2 billion a year.
All right. So let's go back to wireless for a second. So as you know the industry well, What is it that the industry's missing? What haven't, when you look as a consumer, as a business guy, what are we missing as an industry? What have we not solved?
There's no high bid applications that are mainstream yet. You know, when you look at apps, you know, the most popular ones don't consume a lot of bandwidth. And so because, and maybe autonomous cars will be that, maybe, you know, telemedicine will be that to a certain extent, telesurgery, maybe robotics, but there's no mainstream app that just says 100 megabits sustained, no dropouts. And because of that, that changes the discussion with the FCC, right? It changes, you know, how people perceive the need for bandwidth, because most of their interaction is pull out their phone, Snapchat, news, whatever, email, and they don't really think about bandwidth. And so I think that's a big issue, and I think that's where we can get whipsawed, because there will be those applications at some point. There are going to be, you know, there's some 12-year-old somewhere just that's saying, okay, I'm going to stream this, it has to be wireless, and I need 100 megabits sustained, and it's not going to be for reruns of Gilligan's Island on Netflix, you know. It's got to be something of importance. But I think that's the challenge right now, that there's not that application that just drives everything. You know, we had the net drive connectivity, and then broadband, and broadband, you know, is needed just for day-to-day stuff. It's a utility as it applies to the internet, but we need that, okay, this is a game changer. And that will drive adoption and speed, just like the internet drove adoption of broadband.
So one more, so a big part of the show, a big discussion we've had the last couple of days around Internet of Things. You mentioned it a little bit in some of the sensor company. You know, we talk a little bit about the customer experience and having everything in your life connected, and really that experience is tough. It intimidates people. What's your thoughts around that as you think through this going forward?
We're just in the first inning. You know, I just got my first Echo, Alexa, you know, and my kids love it. My kids are 7, 10, and 13, right? So all day long in the kitchen, it's Alexa, Alexa, you know, do this, and they, you know, but I think we're still in the testing phase, the first inning, because we still have to poke and prod, right? The sensors are still first generation, and so they're not really providing back to us information where we say, oh, I hadn't thought about that yet. And so that's going to be the first issue. So we're really just automating things we've already done. It's like the first generation of PCs where you got Lotus 1, 2, 3. Remember that one? And it would automate your spread, your hand, the things you did with the 10-key keypad calculator. So I think Internet of Things is going to start really integrating, but we're not going to see a crush until we start getting sensors where people say, wow, that solves a problem, that changes my life. Right now it just kind of simplifies, and they're gadgets. But you have to go through the process, right? You have to know how it works. You have to learn what the security issues are going to be. You have to learn what the connectivity issues are going to be. You have to learn what the interface issues are going to be.
Great. All right, a little bit of a lightning round.
Okay.
Okay, you ready?
Yep.
Okay, what's your favorite device and why?
All of them. I'm a geek. I don't know. I use a Samsung 7 Android, but I also have one of those iPad Pros. So, yeah, I'll walk that line very carefully.
That was good. That was
like that?
People, certain folks on either side here. All right, what's the dumbest piece of technology you've ever purchased?
Oh, QCat. Anybody remember the QCat way back in the day, where it was a thing? This is 90s, I think. Yeah, late 90s. Where it was like a little mouse-like device where you would put it over a piece of, like a newspaper, and it would recognize URLs, and then you literally had a wire that took it to a PC, and it would bring up the URL, that website. I was like, obviously you've never heard of it.
Okay, do you binge watch, and give us a couple of your favorite binge watching shows?
So I've turned into a binge watcher, when I'm on the elliptical at home. So you get the kids to bed, and about 9:30, 10 o'clock, I'll get on the elliptical. And so Walking Dead, The Night Of, that just was on, watched that. House of Cards, I've watched. And I'm trying to get into Stranger Things. It's just weird, you know, which is the whole point, right? But you have to really concentrate on that show, and I'm not really good at, you know, being on the elliptical, staying on the elliptical, and concentrating on, okay, that 80s reference right there, so
not working.
Not working.
Where would you like to take innovation next?
That's a great question. See, we all were born too soon, right? All the good shit's going to happen next. said every generation ever, right? But I really think personalized medicine, the whole big data, I'm a big believer that everything we know as conventional wisdom about health is going to turn out wrong, right? It's like when I was a kid, steak and potatoes made you big and strong, and then it was like, no, it's going to clog your arteries and you'll be dead. So with big data in the future, we'll have so much data and enough processing power where the data will be able to tell us things, as opposed to now where you have to determine what tests you're going to make, what experiments you're going to do, which means you have to pre-select certain options. And so I think, I say this all the time. My son, who's 7, by the time he's 35, let's say, the idea of walking into a drugstore and buying over-the-counter medicine will seem barbaric. He'll be like, Dad, you mean you really walked into some place and there was a little message on the bottom of the OTC medication that says, you may be the one unlucky schmuck that dies from this. It'll all be personalized. You put your thumb in, maybe it takes a little blood, maybe it doesn't, and then it'll tell you, it'll give you the exact medication that you need for you at that point in time. And so that's going to change our world, and we're going to live a lot longer, and that's going to create a lot of other ethical problems and a lot of problems. So there's all this confluence of different things that technology is going to drive. It's going to be amazing. Great.
One last question, and we know we're out of time. I still want to hear the answer. Favorite business leader right now?
Randall Stevenson, of course.
Great answer. Perfect. With that, give Mark a round of applause.